You're listening to a Keokuk Area History Syndicate production.
So, Jackie, if you could start telling me your name, when you were born, and where you were born.
My name is Jacqueline Elizabeth Hampton Scott. I was born in Keokuk, Iowa at the St. Joe Hospital. My mother's name was Dolores Elizabeth Hampton Bradley. She was a single parent. My father's name was Wallace Eugene Galbraith. And we lived with my grandmother, who was Edna Hampton. And it was kind of like a family dwelling where there were my mother's siblings all had a bedroom, so they were raising their kids in grandparents' house until they got up to where they could, I guess, afford their own places, and we moved out. In other words, we all went to our own. My mother got married, and we moved to a new resident, but still here in Keokuk. Growing up, we stayed in our neighborhood. Our cousins, the family was all very close. Our cousins, we were like brothers and sisters, and everyone wanted to come to Grandma's house, even though when you moved out, because she had a nice big yard that was all dirt because we'd worn the grass off. But we loved to play in the dirt. We loved to pick the big flowers off the trees and make mud pies. And she had an old cistern in the yard that we would use for our table and our stove to cook our whatever. But we had lots of fun just playing in the yard. So we didn't venture too far out of the neighborhood, out of that block, that single block, until our parents moved away.
What block was this?
It was right over here on 408 North 12th. It's right now it's a garden for the Inertia Boys and Girls Center, but her house sat there, and the old willow tree and mulberry tree is still in the backyard. So we ate mulberries until we got a tummy ache. And there was a grocery store, which was Higgins then, across the street. So that they were starting to build that building when I was a little girl then. And so we went over with pieces of cardboard and made streets and ran cars around playing in the dirt. You know, that was our thing, was the dirt, because there were so many of us. And when we got a little older, we could take our tennis rackets or whatever and hit the tennis balls against the side of the building till they ran us off. But it was a neighborhood thing. Everyone, played within the neighborhood, and the cousins, and we couldn't wait for our parents to go out on a Friday or Saturday night, because all the grandkids came to, we called her Hampy, and because it was Grandhampy. And so we would go there, and she would make up big bowls of popcorn and cookies and fudge, and just she was everybody's friend in the neighborhood. All the kids liked to come to her house. And she took in lots of strangers. I mean, she was always feeding somebody or, seeing to their needs or whatever. So the kids, we couldn't wait to go there when they would go out, because we knew we was going to have fun. We would take, she had a linoleum on the floor, and if you know about linoleum, it's cold and it's hard and it's slick. So we usually, when the weather was bad, we'd swim on her floor. We would just, scoot ourselves. Really, we were dust at the floor. But we would swim around on the floor under the tables and what have you. The one thing I really remember was my grandfather at Christmas time, and they weren't wealthy people, so, a lot of the gifts were homemade. But he always had rolls of pennies. And at Christmas time, all the kids and the grandkids, everyone came to her house for dinner. If you can imagine, she had 6 kids, and they would bring their families, and we'd all have dinner there together. And naturally, she had tables full of every kind of cookie and candy and apples and oranges. But he would always take these pennies, and he would spin them on the floor and roll them across the floor. And, you know, as fast as you could scoot along the floor, that was what you got. You know, it meant lots of pennies. Well, then, come the next morning, the excitement was to go across the street to Higgins and buy the penny candy. So, but then the evening wasn't so much fun because you lined up and everybody got a dose of castor oil. If you know what castor oil is, it gives you the poopies. They called it cleaning you out because of all the junk. So when you ate a lot of junk, if it was Christmas, if it was Halloween, whatever it was,
They would give you castor oil.
They would give you castor oil. And you lined up and everybody, it's a wonder you weren't sick because everybody got the same spoon, the big bottle. I can see them standing there with this big bottle, big brown bottle, and pouring this castor oil, and you had to open up, and they did this and shoved it in. So you had to swallow. You had to swallow it. So, but holidays were really a lot of fun for us. So, we just it was a family thing, and you know where all the aunts and the uncles and the cousins always got together.
How many
And,
siblings did you have?
I have 5.
Are you the oldest?
I'm the oldest. I'm the oldest. My mom was a single parent for my first 5 years, and then my sister came along, and then she got married, and then she had 4 more kids by the man that she married, my stepfather.
Okay, so it's you, and then you have 4 half siblings who are all okay.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah. So no, I have 5 half siblings.
Oh, 5. Oh, okay. So
there's 5 girls and 1 boy.
okay.
So
So there's 6 kids total.
6 kids total. But only myself and my sister. You probably haven't met Catherine, but she was over at Hope House, and we were the ones that lived there.
I have met Catherine.
Okay, she's my half sister.
Okay.
Yeah, she's my half sister. And so, after my mother got married, they moved over on 16th Street, and so that's where we moved. We all moved over there. So, and there was, like I said, the 6 kids of us, but we had a lot of fun. We didn't venture too far out of the neighborhood. We played house and we played dolls, and my mom loved. She made all of our clothes practically, unless she got them from a rummage sale or someplace. But she had to. She taught us how to make doll clothes. So naturally, we played house a lot. And we played school, and I guess that's why I became a school teacher, because I was always the teacher, but when I got older, I got to be the principal, so I got to slap them around. But growing up, we played in the yard. We had a big old tub that was like a swimming pool, like a trough, tub thing, and they would fill it up with water. And they would always bring these chickens, because they had chickens and hogs out in the country, and they'd bring them home and chop the heads off, which I know sounds gruesome. And our job was to go chasing these chickens with no heads on them. Yeah, and then we picked the feathers off of these chickens. So, and then we'd always go in the spring to a farm and pick strawberries. And my mom did a lot of canning, and so a lot of what we had, she canned and put in the freezer, from strawberries to green beans to you name it. So they did a lot of that kind of stuff.
Did your mom work growing up?
Yeah, she did. She worked at first. She cleaned houses, because I can remember riding on a bicycle with her, and I don't know how old I was. I wasn't in school yet, and I remember her, and I got to be pretty good friends with the family that she took care of. And when I got a little older, my grandmother took me to work with her. She cleaned houses, and we walked, which I thought was a long ways, but it was probably 7 or 8 blocks. And my job was to these beautiful homes on Grand and Orleans, and my job was to dust all the woodwork around the baseboards and whatever I could reach. And she always gave me a quarter, and boy, I thought I was rich because I got 25 pieces of candy with that quarter.
And no castor oil.
And no castor oil. But I had it, she would always give me a quarter, for going to help her. And, but I would take it over and, like I said, get penny candy because you got a whole sack full of candy.
And I forgot, before we continue, what race or ethnicity do you identify?
Black.
Black, okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
yeah.
Both your mother and father were black?
Or black. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're saying, well, wait a minute, you don't look, because I get this a lot.
I mean, people all...
Yeah, nowadays it's no biggie, but I used to, I was everything from being a white girl to Indian to being Greek to being whatever.
Even amongst the black community?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, I've been accused of being a racist and everything else. I'll get to that point later on down the road. But, yeah. So, that's my mother right there on the wall.
Oh.
See if that's her. That's Dolores. Elizabeth. She's an Elizabeth. Her grandmother is Elizabeth, and her great-grandmother is an Elizabeth. So we have all these Elizabeths going in our middle names. So, and now my granddaughters, I have 3, and they all have Elizabeth. And I'm about to have a great-granddaughter, Josie, and her middle name's going to be Elizabeth. It has to be Elizabeth. I told them before she even gets here, she has to be an Elizabeth. So.
There's a picture of her when we got married, so you can tell where she went.
Wow.
So I got sick, and so I lost my hair.
Yeah.
But, and I liked it so short. Now I just get it cut like this. So
it's easier to maintain.
Yeah.
So it seems like you had just a really beautiful, wonderful childhood.
Well, I have no regrets. I had fun, I just remember all the fun things that we did,
Were there any challenges growing up at all?
Probably so. You mean as far as being able to do certain things?
Yeah, some examples that people have said in the past is maybe like poverty or the chronic illness or abuse.
Yeah, I couldn't start school with my other cousins because there's several of us of the same age. I had to wait because I had romantic fever. And I just remember laying in a bed at my grandmother's house in the window so I could look out at all the other kids going to school. I remember that. And then in the midst of all of that, I wound up with chicken pox and the mumps.
At the same time?
At the same time. Yeah. So that part, I guess you would say, was quite. So they all went to school a year ahead of me. So, but.
Tell me about your education, actually, and as we're kind of segueing into that.
Well, I went to kindergarten at Garfield because it was close to where my mother worked, and then when we moved, I went to the old Washington Central, and I was in the Brownies and the Girl Scouts, and I remember playing on the rings and the teeter-totters and that kind of stuff. And I have a couple of teachers that I remember. In fact, one, I was fortunate enough to get to work with her as an adult because she was still teaching. And she came to my wedding, and she corresponded state. She was always sending me cards, or if I was in the newspaper for something or whatever, she'd send me the clippings. So Glenna Gash was her name, and I can remember being in her class. She lived the stories that she read to us. You were just fascinated and spellbound to hear her read stories, and because she more or less acted them out with her voice, she really got into changing her voice and becoming a part of the story. So I remember her, and then she was my third grade teacher. And then my sixth grade teacher was Mrs. Ryder, and I had the opportunity to work with her when I came back to Keokuk to get a job. And she was my sixth grade teacher, and I really, really liked her. So I think it was my first grade teacher. I didn't like her. And maybe that's why I stayed so many years in first grade, because she, spelling was always hard for me. And she would make me stay in at recess and write these words I couldn't spell over and over and over. And then one time I had to stay in and just say it over and over and over. And but I've had some very nice teachers along the way.
So you had to repeat first grade?
No, I didn't repeat first
Oh, you
grade.
just-
I had to stay in at recess.
Oh, that's what.
No,
yeah.
I wouldn't get to
Okay.
go outside and play.
Okay. I
Because
see.
something wouldn't click up here. And believe it or not, I really wasn't an outgoing kid. You know, I don't want to say I was shy and bashful, but I just stayed to myself. You know, so
More introverted.
yeah, and so that's the way I was growing up.
How was like middle school and high school?
Middle school, this is probably the part you don't want to hear. I was in the more or less the mid to late 50s during the heat of the civil rights commotion, and so I can remember going to the middle school, which was on Main Street at the time, and I remember going across the street to the Kieslings, and we could go in and be served, but we couldn't sit down at the counter. We had to take our drink, and I loved these cherry phosphates. They were just delicious. But we would go over and get one, and then just take it back across the street to the school and sit on the steps. You know, we didn't have no problem. And again, all my cousins were with me, because we all kind of, like I said, we were like sisters, you know, more than just cousins. And we went to the theater. We had to go upstairs. We had to sit up in the balcony. We couldn't sit downstairs, which didn't bother me. I could see more than, you know, than if I was downstairs. So that didn't bother me at all. And the same with the 5 and dime. It was like Woolsworth, I think. Was it Woolsworth or Kresge? Yeah, Woolsworth. They wouldn't let us sit at the counter.
So the like private businesses could discriminate or segregate, but the public schools, that was never like a thing.
No, not growing up.
Yeah.
I
So like
wasn't-
in primary
no.
school,
No.
it was just
Yeah,
mixed
I
classrooms.
I was unaware of it, I guess, because I went to school. I knew what my job was at school. My mom was very adamant and strict about school. School was the most important thing that you could acquire, and you had homework, and we called it table time. So you went to kitchen table and you sat down, and if you didn't bring homework, she gave you something to read or something to do. But everybody had table time in her house, and what she said, she meant business. I mean, otherwise you were going outside to a bush and you were going to break off a stick.
Go find your switch.
Yeah. And she would tell you, don't bring me a little one, you know. So you better go get a nice one, because you knew you were going to get it around the legs.
Was your stepfather? Do you call him your father?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's my
Was your
dad.
father? Was your dad present in your life?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Was he supportive of education, or what was his role?
I didn't really see him that much. He was what I call a holiday dad, more or less a sperm donor.
I see.
Yeah. He would bring me gifts or toys or stuff like that, you know, maybe 2 or 3 times out of the year. And he was an alcoholic.
Did he live at home, or was he kind of just
No,
like?
he lived in Chicago.
Oh, okay.
No, but he has family here. And so, like I said, I didn't see him that much other than holidays. And in the summer, I'd have to go spend a week with him in order to get my school clothes. And I'm like, okay, now, and the older I got, the more I'm thinking, no, this is not working, because I have to go spend a week away from my friends, who are all telling me about all the fun things they're doing back in Keokuk. And I'm in a strange place with strange people and not really knowing a whole lot of people. And so but my mom would make me go, so I would have to get on a train and ride to Chicago in care of the conductor, and he would meet me on the other end. And then I would come home with 2 outfits, a pair of shoes, undies, and socks. And you can tell me if that's a fair trade.
It was like the weekly ritual.
Yeah. So
Or the summer
I don't
ritual.
want to sound, what should I put it? I don't want to sound sarcastic, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
You know, I had a great, terrific mom. I had a super stepfather who really stepped in. In fact, when we got married, I had both of them walk me down the aisle. I had both of them.
And the stepfather is the father of your siblings,
Yes.
the other siblings.
Mhm.
And so, what role did he play in your upbringing?
Oh, he was always there, just always there.
What was his job?
He was a janitor at the Trinity, and then then he was at Union Electric, and then he started his own business. You heard of Bradley Hauling? Okay, that's him.
Okay.
Yeah, he's Bradley Hauling, and he had started out with this old rickety rackety truck, and I would get to go to the landfill with him, and I was just scared to death because he always went down through the cemetery taking a shortcut. And but it was always fun because we knew at the end of the run we were going to the Dixie Cream Donut place and getting hot donuts, you know. Or if it was a Saturday, then we were gonna get to go have these huge tenderloins from the A&W. So it was always a special, you know. And but he always made things special, Christmas time and any time, you know. We would go. I was not treated any different than the other kids, let's just put it that way. And so he, like I said, he was always there.
He was just a present.
Yeah, if I, as an adult, I got involved with Kids Zone, and I wanted to take the kids to Washington, D.C., and I asked him, I said, well, Pops, how about, would you donate to me? So he said, how much you need? I said, $200. So give me $200. I mean, he was always like that. Just if you asked him for something, he would more than willingly give it to you. He may grumble and whatever, but he'd always, try to. Before he and my mother got married, he gave me a Lionel train that I still have. And he always teased me about it. When you going to give me my train back? And I said, well, that's a gift. I'm not giving it back. And but I still have it to this day. 70 years old.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So it's just, and Christmas was always a big to-do at our house. I mean, they just, well, he'll tell you, they just showered us with gifts and money, and he left home when he was like 11. He was quite the character growing up, and so his mother passed away, and so he went to live with an uncle. Then he ran away and became a hobo and traveled to trains, and till he wound up here in Keokuk. So, and then he wound up at where the Hope House used to be a boarding house, and that's where my mother met him at.
Wow.
Because we lived across the alley in my grandmother's house. So it's all intertwined there.
Yeah.
So
tell me about high school and like secondary education. So after high school, did you go to university, or tell me about?
Yeah, I went to. I went out here to Keokuk Community first because I needed to work and get the money to go to school, because my mom still had 5 other kids. And
where was that located?
Out there where the high school is now.
Okay.
Is it the Washington Street side?
So it's still in town.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was the board office now. I think it's the science wing or something now. So, but that's where I went to. I got my first 2 years, and then after that I went to University of Iowa for a summer, because then I got married, and so he was driving back and forth to Davenport to work, and I thought that's unfair, and so I went.
You transferred?
I transferred to Marycrest, which was the women's side of St. Ambrose. You familiar with St. Ambrose? Okay, well, St. Ambrose is a Catholic men's school, and it's now co-ed. And Marycrest were the women.
Okay.
And so they're both. Marycrest is no longer there. I think the Japanese or somebody bought them out or something. I don't know. But that's where I got my degree from there. And
What did you study?
elementary ed. I went in with the intent of going into special education, and at the time they didn't have certification, and so I didn't want to stay any longer waiting on them to get certified to be able to offer me a degree in special education. So I switched to elementary ed and took a minor in special education. So I have a double minor, and my degree is in elementary ed. So that's how I wound up there. But high school was, I tended to my own business, and like I said, we were in the middle of towards the end of discrimination, civil rights movement, I guess, because the schools were integrated, but a lot of things that were going on in and around town weren't. I mean, everybody had his place, and places where you knew you could go, and places where you knew you better not go, and that. And my mom she was very strict. You had a curfew, and you had X amount of dollars for your $2.50 for lunch for the week, and you could save it up and take your own lunch and have money for the weekend, or you could buy the school lunches. Well, I saved mine up so I could go to the dances or whatever, or have money to spend. So, because we couldn't work, because to her, education was the most important thing. I'm a baby boomer, so it was one of these, my boyfriend's going off to the military, and so here I am, one last fling. So she became pregnant in high school as a senior. So
This is your mom?
Yeah, this is my mom. So she never got to graduate. But she always wanted that degree, and we kept telling her, you could still go back and get your GED and whatever. Well, she had all these other things going. But anyway, that's another story. So,
so you graduated in elementary education. Let's talk just a little bit about your career first. So did you teach in a public school?
Mm-hmm. I've always taught here. Well, I did my student teaching in Davenport, and I came back here, and that got to be another fiasco, because this was in the early 70s, and there wasn't black teachers in Keokuk, maybe one every now and then, but they never stayed. And I came, and they didn't want to hire me. Well, they hired me over the phone through the school, but when I got here, there was no job.
Why do you think that was?
Because I was black, plain and simple. And I don't have a problem talking about it, but I went for the interview, and they said, well, maybe we'll give you a trial. You want to sub for a year. No, I'm not subbing. I graduated with honors at top of my class. I'm not subbing for a year. And well, they was adamant, well, we really don't have anything right now then, we don't have anything. We filled all those positions. Because when Marycrest called, they had 4 openings at the elementary level. And I was determined I was going to have one of them. So I went home, and I told my stepfather, I said, they told me they're not going to hire me, they want me to sub. Well, he put his shoes on, and you had to have seen him and know him, how he reacted. he said, no, you're not. And so we went down to Father Boston, who was the head of the Civil Rights Commission here in town. And he got on the phone, and it wasn't even a half hour, I had a job.
What changed?
They threatened him. I'm just going to be blunt. They threatened him. And I don't want to get into the who's, and because that's not fair to these,
Right.
It's not fair to beat the dead, in
Yeah.
other words.
No, absolutely.
Because they said, well, we really thought maybe, she needed to have the experience. She didn't come with it. Okay, now you just hired 3 other people. They don't have any experience. They just graduated the same as I did, and no more of a prestige college than I did. And they didn't come with the background that I'm coming here with, the grades and the. So anyway, they gave me the job.
So what did you teach?
I taught first grade. I taught second grade at the same school that I went to, Washington Central.
How long did you teach second grade?
I taught 11 years there. They tore the building down and put the new George Washington. And at that time, they had to separate, they had to go by seniority. Some of them were rifted because, they had to get rid of some of us to make room, because they weren't going to have. There were 4 second grades. And the new building was only going to have 2. So that meant 2 of us had to be gone somewhere. So they had to wind up categorizing them by seniority. Well, the girl that I got hired 10 minutes before she did. That's how sticky it got down to, when they were relocating us, And so some of them lost their jobs, and the rest of us got moved out of the buildings or whatever, And so there was a lot of resentment and a lot of how I call it.
Hard feelings.
Yeah, and I've had people that I worked with when I got moved from that building to the Wells Carey. I had my choice of Wells Carey or Hawthorne, and I took Wells Carey because it was closer to home. But there was it was hard trying to fit in the mix. So I went to my classroom, I did my job. I didn't hang out in the lounge, and I didn't party, and I did those kinds of things. That's not what I was there for. Let's put it that way. But I had teachers that we became good friends, that came to me afterwards and said, we really didn't like you when you came because of the way so-and-so had to lose her job. Well, it wasn't my thought, that's the district. The district had to do what they had to do, because they had to follow the law, or the law was going to be on them, and they're going to lose some of their funding. So you just need to know that it wasn't me, So they said, oh, no, we're sorry, but, we're really glad you're here. And I said, well, I'm here to do a job, so whether you like me or you don't, I'm here for kids, not adults,
So the whole getting hired in the first place was difficult because of race.
Yeah.
Once you were hired, were you the only black teacher in the school?
Well, that's another story. Because she came the year after me, I think it was, another black teacher who lived here, and they did the same thing to her. And I told her, I said, don't do it. No, don't
accept it?
Don't accept it. Well, then they gave her X amount of dollars, to just move on. But it was hard to get into this district, and,
Did you face discrimination, on a professional level after you were hired?
I didn't hang with the people.
So it wasn't even an issue because you just didn't.
It wasn't an issue to me because my focus was on the classroom. I went into this career for kids, and I just tell them, I'm not here for the adults. I'm here for kids, and I'm here to do my job. you're here to give me a paycheck and we can be friends. But that's up to you, because I'm going to do what I know I have been trained to do. And that's just the way it is, and that's just the way I am, and that's kind of like the Inertia Center. That's another fiasco.
Do you want to share that? Do you want to finish talking about your time as a teacher, or do you want to go into
Well,
inertia?
that's up to you where you want me to go.
Yeah, so you taught second grade for 11 years, and then what happened after that?
Then I went to second grade.
Okay.
I went to first grade over at Wells Carey.
Okay. That was when the new building was happening.
That's when the new building came.
And then there's like layoffs occurred.
Yes.
And how long were you there?
At Wells Carey?
Yes.
Well, let's see, I taught 37 years. I was 11 there.
So 26.
Yeah, because I spent 5 years at Kids Zone.
Okay.
I don't know if you're familiar with Kids Zone. It's the before and after school program.
Oh, okay.
It was the 21st century when they came out big with after school programs. Okay, so I had, I was ready to retire. I had my retirement pretty much in place with the district. And when they offered it to me, it was almost doubling my wages.
The position at Kids Zone.
Kids
Wow.
Zone was, it was all, well, they got $5 million, $1 million a year for 5 years. Just for a kickoff, and I'm like, wow, this is anybody's dream. I wanted for nothing, we could do whatever. I worked half days.
That's amazing.
The same amount, but they offered me my same retirement benefits, my same medical. They gave me everything I had as a classroom teacher. They let me carry that all with me.
But then you didn't have to work full time.
No.
Yeah.
No. And I'm making twice the money. Almost 3 times the money.
That's amazing.
Which put me into another tax bracket with IPERS. So I'd have been a real idiot not to accepted it. And I'm already retirement age. So I know I'm guaranteed my IPERS. So we talked it over, and he said, well, do whatever I wanted. And I had a hard time because I think, I really like the classroom. I like what I'm doing. I like the building where I'm at, and yeah, you have issues, but, you can just throw them to the wind. But I just made up my mind walking into the superintendent's office. I got in there and I said, okay, Miss Babcock, I think I'll take the job. And she said, I can't believe it. I said, well, I'm taking the job. Okay, where do you want me to sign? So she said, I'll treat you right, and I'll see that you get all the same benefits, and even when you get ready to retire, I'll make sure you get your full retirement. And she did. Before she left her, she made sure I had everything that if I'd have stayed in the classroom. So
tell me about the start of Inertia. How this happened, how this came about.
Okay. That's another story. Well, I was at Kids Zone, our before and after school program, and I had started.
Where was that held?
It was at all of our elementary buildings.
Oh, okay.
And I was the assistant project manager, and so I was over Hawthorne, and I was over 5 other buildings, underneath the umbrella of the project director. Okay, and so what happened was I started this can line, which was drumming group with garbage cans. I don't know if you're familiar. Okay, so we needed a place to practice because we couldn't use the school on certain Saturdays or after certain hours because the Y used it for basketball and whatever have you not. So my son worked for Interlink, which owned the Inertia building, and they weren't doing anything with it. They were remodeling the inside of it. Well, they had so many issues and problems with it, with wiring, and just, it was a mess, that they walked away and left it. But there was a room in the back which was like a warehouse, and they let us go in there and practice on Saturday mornings. So the parents could bring them, and we put the drums over to the inertia center, and the kids would come there to practice. Well, then Kid Zone lost its funding, so that meant the end of
Basically like childcare for the town, right?
Yeah. It didn't start that way. So we got started doing summer camps for Kid Zone kids. But some of the kids, I don't want to call them the elite, but the really talented kids, like your talented and gifted kids, we started using summer camps for them. We came here and met in Bethel for the first 2 summers. And then we tried to get funding to go use the building that we have. And the state told me I would need a miracle. They would never approve me for that. I would need, and those are their words, a miracle.
Why?
And I said, because, well, it was terrible. The pigeons.
Like the zoning or like getting it up to code.
Yeah, they had taken over. It was terrible. It was awful. But anyway, so I said, well, I believe in miracles. So we worked and we worked night after night, and we were still doing summer camps, and we just wasn't making enough to keep it going. So we thought, well, okay, let's do daycare for a year. Let's go ahead and do daycare and get some money. Well, we went to every single bank in town, and none of them would help us, not one. We made up our business plan, very professional business plan, went around and tried to get funding, and nobody would help us.
Why do you think they wouldn't help? Just because the funding?
Because they said Keokuk did not need a daycare like that. They just didn't need it.
I think the fathers of the town got their heads together and said, that's something we don't need.
Mm-hmm. We have enough.
Even though the kids are out with no place to go after school,
mm-hmm.
and then the banks just sworn us,
mm-hmm.
said no.
So
based on community pressure.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So we worked and we built it up, and we said, okay, if we looked at our numbers, and if we can get 10 kids, we can make it. And that first year we got 30. And then we grew and we grew until now there's 130, 140 some, I think, and 70 on a daily basis.
Well, we had one guy.
One man.
One bank
Mm-hmm.
told us he was going to back us.
Yeah.
And that was George Ihor
Mm-hmm.
out of Fort Madison.
Okay.
He's First Community Bank.
First Community Bank out of Fort Madison was the one that sponsored you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he said, do it, and he'd help us.
Yeah.
And he sent us to Steve Darrow at, what was that?
Security State. Mm-hmm.
And
he said, I can see your vision. And those are his words to me. He said, I can see your vision. And I said, good, And he did. And he's always been in our corner. I mean...
When was this?
2008. 2008. Mm-hmm.
So this has been like a 14-year...
Yeah, battle. Mm-hmm. So... but it's growing to where now we have a waiting list.
I know.
And we're branching out. The state has finally come around and seen what... We don't classify ourselves as a daycare. We're a learning center. That means you're not expecting your child to come in here and just play and watch TV and do nothing.
There's a curriculum.
There is a curriculum. And there are expectations that we expect. And as partners in education, we will work together. So you have to understand that first and foremost, like during the summer, you will read for a half hour. You will get a book out, and if you can't read, somebody's going to read to you. But you have a math time, and it's not a classroom. The learning that takes place is, I guess I should say, it's disguised learning, because the kids think, oh boy, we're going to get to make cupcakes today. Well, little do they know they're learning to measure, and they're learning to count. and they're learning to follow directions. And so, you know, if they think they're just having fun, they're learning along the way, you know. Even our older kids, you know. We just finished, or they're still in the midst of rhythm camp. And it's amazing the kids that don't realize that rhythm is no more than math, you know? And so I'm not being devious, but we are disguising the learning.
Well, it's like project-based integrated learning.
Yeah, and so, you know, that's how we pride ourselves on the things that we do. So,
I love that. I'm going to go back in time a little bit. Tell me about how you and Joe met. Tell me about like when you met, your courtship, when you got married.
Well, I met his sister first, and this was in high school, and she kept saying, you know, my brother over there, you know, he really wants to ask you out, but he doesn't want to, you know. And I said, well, what's the problem? She said, he said, I don't know what his problem is. So I said, well, you just go ahead and tell him. I'll ask him would he like to go to the A&W. And so I don't know, one thing led to another, and the next thing I know, he asked me to the prom.
Oh.
Yeah, and so...
Not just A&W, it just
to the prom.
escalated.
Yeah, escalated to the prom. And at first my mom said no, because we got this strict lady, right? And she's saying, no, I don't think so.
And was Joe older than you?
Oh, yeah, he's 3 years older than me.
Okay.
Yeah. And so, and then to go to a prom. Well, I could go to the dance part of the prom, but not the after prom, you know, the after whatever, which was okay. So I guess it was okay. So he took me to the prom. And so then we went to the movies and, you know, blah, 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 blah. And then I graduated. He was still here, and he had this 55 Chevy that just rattled and, you know, souped up car. And my stepfather, he hated it because he said, here comes that boy again. He's in that car, because the TV would get all fuzzy and when he drove
Well, at
up.
least he knew that he couldn't sneak you out.
No, yeah. Or he would stay too long, and he'd say, he'd tell my mom, he'd say, because he'd be in the kitchen, he'd say, Dolores, when's that boy going home? It's getting late, that boy needs to go, get up out of here. I'm thinking, but he never took the hint. So we just dated, and then he went into the service. He got drafted, and
Vietnam?
and so then when he came, we corresponded all through that, and dated when he came home on leave.
How long was that?
4 years?
Two and a half.
Yeah,
2.5
so we
years.
dated for about 4 years.
Okay.
And but it was funny. So then,
So when he came back, were you doing your 2 years here at the local
right.
college, and then you transferred?
and then I transferred. We got
Okay.
married, and then I transferred.
You got married here in Keokuk?
Yep, out of Trinity Church.
The Trinity Methodist Church? Okay.
Yeah, with the wings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, when did you start having children?
When I graduated in '71.
Okay. And how many children do you have?
2 boys. I have 2 boys.
Okay.
Yeah. One was supposed to be a girl, but he's a boy.
And so you did like a gender scan, and they said that he was a girl, but he was born a boy.
No. I just said that. No, we didn't do any of that.
Oh, okay.
But that's what we wanted.
Oh, that's what you wanted. Oh, I see,
That's
I
what we
see.
wanted was a
Okay.
girl.
And is Jay your son?
He's my son.
Okay.
And then my other son is Travis.
So who's the oldest?
Jay.
Jay. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So yeah, he's 8 years older than Travis.
So what's your family? What was your family life like?
My family.
Like like your family together.
together?
Now this family you've cultivated.
I don't know. We did a lot of things together. We got our boys involved in Scouts. Both of them are Eagle Scouts. He became a scoutmaster, a cub master, and I became a cub master, and we just got really involved with our boys and the things they did. You know, they played baseball and little t-ball and, you know, swimming and those kinds of things. We did a lot of camping together. You know, we loved the outdoors, and we did a lot of camping.
While you were working as a teacher, was Joe staying at home with the kids, or when they were little?
No, my grandmother watched them.
Oh, okay.
My grandmother watched them.
And what did Joe do after getting out of the service?
Well, he went in. He was with the Bell System, but he was with Northwestern Bell. He was a splicer at first, cable splicer, and then when he come back out of the service, he became an installer. He installed phones, and then he became a loop tech, which was computerized, whatever he did, I don't know, troubleshooting and that kind of stuff. But we just did a lot of things. You know, we took our kids where we went, so we were not party goers or club goers and that kind of thing. We did things as a family. You know, we did a lot of fishing. He would take the boys hunting, and we just did a lot of outdoor things, you know. And
you seem to be extremely involved in like the community, and do you have other experience with like volunteer work or like religious church service, other community efforts in the town?
Yeah, I used to be on the March of Dimes board. I served with Habitat for Humanity. I've done lots of Boy Scouts, Cub Scouts, Y. What else have I done? I was going to bring you a copy of my resume because I can't remember.
Oh, I would love that.
Yeah. So I was, what do you call that, BPW Woman of Achievement. I was Teacher of the Year. I received the Boy Scout Diamond Award. I don't know.
But you've been very involved.
Yeah. So, and those are, I don't want to call those the highlights of my life, because the highlight of my life is inertia. That's what I tell people. And they think I'm crazy, but even at 75 and I'm retired and I now have kidney disease, I still go over there. I'm supposed to go 2 days a week, but Sarah doesn't know when I come in the back door. So I just go in and I just do my little thing with the kids. I still write their programming for them, so I kind of keep my hands in on what's going on. I do the twos. I do an activity once a week with our 2-year-olds, and I do one with our 3 and 4-year-olds. Babies, they're not my thing right now. But, you know, mostly it's the school agers. I write all the programs for them. I plan out their activities. During the school year, I do the early outs for them, you know.
Yeah.
So I still keep my hands in the mix of what's going on.
You mentioned...
Sarah says I spend too much money, but I'm used to that from Kids Zone, because money was no object, you know.
Yeah, and you had a lot of funding and grants.
And I said, don't worry about it. I'll find somebody who'll donate it to me. You know, I got some friends out there. They're dying, but I'll go find somebody that'll give me a, you know, so.
Support inertia.
Yeah.
What have been your main challenges in life? Like, so you've mentioned kidney disease.
Yeah.
Which must be a big challenge. Are there other hard things or challenges that have kind of happened in your life, and how have you coped with it?
The worst is this wheelchair.
The worst is the wheelchair.
The wheelchair. I got to get out of this wheelchair, because I'm used to getting up and walking and going and doing, and to go from here to there would be an obstacle. They have since bought me a scooter, and that's right now is my challenge, because I don't know which way to turn.
Oh, and drive it, yeah.
And drive this silly thing. So, I was in Sam's this morning and during there knocked over the display thing. I'd be so embarrassed. But no.
So health has been kind of the bigger challenge.
Yeah, because I was never sick. I didn't want to say never sick, but rarely down to where I just had to stay home or whatever. And so I spent, a year practically in the hospital.
When was this when you first got your diagnosis?
No, I went in to have a colonoscopy, and they snipped the side of the colon, and I got sepsis. And I was, at the time, I was doing peritoneal dialysis. Well, that just, so it took over me. And so I lost all muscle. So I've been in Iowa City for months and months, and then they sent me to what's called ITAC in Davenport, which is a specialty hospital. And
when
then
did this
the
all
nur-
start to occur?
Hmm?
How long ago did this all start to?
4 years now? 4 years.
So you've been in and out of hospitals in Iowa City and
Yeah, in Davenport, and then nursing homes. I was in one over in Hamilton, and then they sent me back to Iowa City, and then finally I got out of that ordeal, and they sent me to River Hills. I was out there for 3 months, I think.
Is that just like for recovery or for dialysis?
Yeah, for the recovery. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because some of the medicines and things they had me on, I had to be supervised. A lot of them were IVs. And then they sent me, did I go back to Iowa City? I don't remember, but I wound up at Snake Burlington Rehab. Mm-hmm. And so then I finally, my grandson was getting married, and my granddaughter was graduating, all this in the same month. And that was my goal, because I told him, I says, I will dance at your wedding. And I did. He was holding me up, but we danced one whole song. I said, Josiah, whatever you do, don't you dare drop me. And but I danced with him at his wedding. So, but this has probably been my hardest, is to not be able to come and go as I would like.
How do you cope with that? Like, how do you manage just the frustration?
Well, he's my sounding board, and he's my beat up guy. So he's been there every step of the way. In fact, the whole time I'm in the hospital, he refused to leave. When I was in the nursing home, he refused to leave.
So they had to get another bed for Joe?
No, but he had to sleep in a chair.
Oh.
And I'm like, go home. Well, he wasn't going home, and so he's been there every step of the way. So I don't know.
It's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, unbelievable.
Yeah.
So.
In what
Okay.
way do you feel like Keokuk nurtures or harms your identity? Either racially, as a woman, your whole identity?
Well, I'm not politically involved in anything. And I don't know. I've had a lot of good friends in places that could help me achieve what I wanted to do. And I don't want to say I was selfish, but you know, if you get an idea in your head, kind of like the Inertia Center, I'm going to seek somebody or keep at it until I get what I want. You know, I guess that's being selfish. But in that way, you know, there is always, like I said, there is a miracle. There's a ram in the bush wherever. And so I've always managed to find somebody, like I said, somebody is out there that if I asked, where there's a will, there's a way. And somebody's always come to my rescue. If some of them are dead and gone, but a lot of them, you know, even to this day, I can sit back and say, you know, the people that have stepped out on my harebrained ideas,
Yeah.
Let's just put it that way. You know, if I wanted to do an activity with kids and I could explain to them what I want to do, they'd help me. They would say, well, okay, you know, I'm willing to invest.
Or like this banker in Fort Madison.
Like the banker in Fort Madison. And it wasn't just George Ihawker, but Steve Durr was really there for me. And even to this day, when I run into him, and he's since retired, and he'll say, if there's anything I can do or anything you need, you know, give me a call.
Yeah.
You know, Carol Reardon, I don't know if you know Carol, Steve Reardon, but he's since passed away. He's another one that was always there, you know. He ran the wrecker and the junkyard place, and if I would call him and say, Mr. Reardon, I want to do such and such. Well, stop down, I'll give you a check.
That's so nice.
You know, and so there's people like that, you know, and the same in the district. You know, I had some people that would always be there for me if I wanted to say, okay, I want to do this with my kids. You know, they're like, are you serious? Sure, I'm going to take 300 kids to St. Louis to the zoo. You know, I need 5 buses. Okay? So if you can prove what you're doing and you can show how it's going to work and what you're going to do, you'd be surprised the people that'll be there for you.
The community is pretty supportive.
Yeah. Now, I'm not saying the whole community, because I ran into some tough little fellas that would just absolutely tell me no. And some of these same ones, kids came to inertia. Some of the same ones that turned me down,
They are taking
they
their
wanted
kids.
their kids. They wanted their kids in inertia, and the same way with in the classroom. You know, we had the neighborhood concept, but the concept really changed when they could see things going on in a particular classroom and they wanted their kid involved in it. And now I'm willing to transport my child over to a school that is totally out of my neighborhood, which to me was always unfair, because if you can do it for one, you can do it for another. You know, but that's okay, because a kid's a kid, and the kids know. I tell them up front, you know, I don't care who your mom and dad are. You know, they could be the president. But in here, we're all one big family. We're all going to get treated alike, you know, and I'm going to treat you as if you were my own. And if I have to get eyeball to eyeball with you, you know, and I'm going to tell you what's right and what you did wrong, and you're going to answer me and tell me why and what you're going to do the next time, we can be friends, you know. And so the kids just know up front, this is the way I am, and this is just the way it is. And then I've had parents that'll just buck me to the hilt. And, you know, I've had black parents that'll come in there and say I was discriminating, I was picking on their kid, you know, I'm a racist. And I'm like, really? How could you say that when we're the same color? And, well, you let so-and-so. No, I didn't. No, let's back up. So, and
that brings us to that question back, right, where you said that people, like, of all races just had a hard time of pinpointing your race, and you were kind of treated unfairly from all angles.
Yeah, all angles.
Yeah. So that was a challenge for you specifically because of how you look.
No, because I didn't pay any attention to them. I didn't let that. I just let it roll off my back. You know, if you want to introduce me and tell them that I'm Indian, I don't care. You know, I know, God knows, and that's all that matters.
Did your siblings look similar to you?
No.
They're darker in their complexion?
Yeah. And I have since done some genealogy, and so I kind of traced some of my looks from other people.
Yeah.
You know, so.
No, that's last question. This is like my last question, and because I know you're most proud of Inertia.
No, yeah. That's my baby.
Yeah, In what ways has Keokuk evolved socially, politically, or racially over the years since you've lived here?
Well,
I guess businesses now aren't necessarily overtly discriminating.
oh yeah, they do.
They still do.
Oh yeah. I'm not necessarily saying the businesses, but you would be hard pressed to find a black fireman, a black policeman, not many black doctors, and those are choices. But the police and the fire, and what else am I looking for?
Like public service or city council?
Yeah, yeah. You may find one here, one there, and I'm just going to be blunt. They're kind of like a token, because I've been a token.
In the education system?
I've been a token, and so you don't find many, and if you do, and you've never. Well, I don't want to say I hate the word never, but rarely will you find more than one or two at a time.
Do you think it's kind of the similar experience that you had with trying to be hired by the education system? Is that just people kind of push black folks out?
And I think a lot of it is Keokuk still has cliques. It's a cliquey community, and I don't want to say you have the haves and the have-nots, but you have the haves and the have-nots.
When you have people who have opinions who can keep things from happening, right? Like the people with the banks.
Yeah. Say, like my son now, Jay, he's had quite the experiences. He started out as an EMT. The ambulance wouldn't hire him because the other EMTs wouldn't work with him on that ambulance.
Because he was black?
Because he was black. So he went to Hamilton and got a job. So then he became a paramedic, and they still wouldn't hire him.
This is here in Keokuk?
Here in Keokuk. I ain't through yet. And they still wouldn't hire him. He can show up even to this day, he could, within the last couple of years, am I right? Well, you can correct me if I'm wrong. In the last couple of years, he's been somewhere where there's been an accident, and he's got out and tried to help as a volunteer, and they've pushed him away. The police have said, no. I mean, you're going to let somebody lay here and bleed to death because you don't want somebody to treat him? Excuse me. So he joined the Jackson Township Fire Department. They're overjoyed to have him. So he goes to the fire department. You know where Jackson Township is?
Is it in Missouri?
No. It's right out here in...
It's county.
County.
Oh, okay.
They dug the county. Well, to make a long story short, he goes out there one night, goes to get they had a fire call. Somebody calls, one of the neighbors, and said there's a black guy stealing a fire truck. And this was just a few months ago. They accused him of stealing the fire truck. Now, here's a big truck. Where would you take it?
Oh my gosh.
They called, the police come, and they're laughing because, they have to go because they've been called.
But they all know.
But they all know it's him. But yet a neighbor calls and said the black guy just stole the fire truck.
Oh my gosh.
Now, is that not crazy?
It's dehumanizing.
So
it seems like it's good that you're able to laugh about it.
It doesn't bother me because,
How was Jay? Was he okay, or was he just like...
Yeah, he was laughing.
Okay.
It's
just so
we
rude.
Don't look at color, race, because if I lived in another part of the world, I'd be another color. So we've never raised our boys to think of that as, Same way with Travis. He's tried out so many times for our local fire department. And he's been, in fact, once, even the chief had said, oh yeah, you made the cutoff, you made the...
Like the physical fitness
yes,
and whatever.
Yeah. And he thought he was getting hired. No. They had blackballed him because some of the other firemen said no. We wouldn't work. So you know what they did? They had him arrested for weeds. They had a law on the books from back in 18-something where you couldn't have weeds in your yard.
No way. So then you can't become a fireman if you have a criminal record.
No.
So that was what ultimately stopped
Cut him
his.
off. Now he was accused of stealing a phone truck. I'll let him tell that story.
Well, when I interview you, yeah, I want to hear that next time. I'm going to write that down. Is there any last thoughts or stories that you want to end the interview with? This has just been such a pleasure for me. Thank you.
No, I don't know. Like I said,
it's been wonderful.
Life just goes on. I'm 75 years old. What else is there to do but to chuckle?
It's the healthiest way.
Chuckle, and I go to Inertia, and I tell Sarah, I said, the kids give me a headache, I'm going home. You're not paying me. I'm over here, I'm a volunteer, so, I work for the paper towels or toilet paper. So, I don't expect you to pay me. I mean, if you want to pay me, then I'm going to buy something for the kids or for the room or for something that I want for the kids to have.
Which is funny because she says you spend too much money anyway. So
I know,
like,
I don't.
Put you in a rock and a hard place.
Well, not really, because then they see what we do with it.
Oh yeah, no, it's just incredible.
Yeah.